Welcome to TriMet 101. New shirt and a couple of new decorations. We've had quite an eventful October, haven't we? Well, it is time that we talk about the Type 1s because they are officially retiring. It came right from the horse's mouth. At the end of August, TriMet released a Writers Club article that officially mentioned that the Type 6s are going to be coming into service soon, and that means that the Type 1s will be going out of service soon. I knew I'd one day be making this video, but it still pains me to do it. And also, if I sound a little weird and under the weather, it's because that's exactly what's happening. I'm recovering from some pretty nasty flu. Welcome to Monday Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing these old relics. I'll go over the pros and cons, and I'm going to do this a bit backwards and start with the cons. Firstly, accessibility. These are the last vehicles in the TriMet fleet to have steps at the doors. TriMet retired the last of the high-floor buses, the 2100 series, in 2016, I believe. Stairs are hard for some people to climb and are flat-out impossible to climb if you're in a wheelchair. So it's kind of an accessibility bummer. It's also pretty difficult to bring your bike on board the train. It's not impossible, and in fact, there are areas reserved for bikes on board the Type 1 trains. But the areas that were once used for wheelchair seats and that sort of accessible seating area were turned into areas where you could just stand with a bike. Seems more like an afterthought. I should probably explain how the Type 1s used to be wheelchair accessible. Before the Type 2 trains entered service in the mid-1990s, every Max Station platform had a wheelchair lift right at the very front of it. And so if you were in a wheelchair, the operator would have to stop the train at just the right position to line up with the wheelchair lift, and then open the door, and then he'd have to get out of his cab and operate the wheelchair lift, which took forever. And so the wheelchair would go in, it'd get lifted up, and into the Type 1 trains. And the frontmost seats in the large area by the front of the trains where there's no seats, and there's just this large open space, that frontmost forward-facing seat used to be a flip-up seat. And that's where the wheelchairs would go. There are a couple of old videos on the internet that show that, but it's very, very, very much not used anymore. I have a playlist on my channel that has some really old TriMet videos in it, and there's one where you can see that in action. Then the Type 2 trains came out, and TriMet slowly began removing all the wheelchair lifts from all the Max stations, because the Type 2's wheelchair accessibility was far, far better and far faster than the old wheelchair lifts, because all it is just a simple bridge plate that extends from the train and then levels with the platform. That's it. It just takes a few seconds to activate, rather than the operator having to go out of the cab and manually operate a wheelchair lift and then get everything all situated to go afterwards. It is much better now that we have the Type 2 trains. After all the wheelchair lifts were removed, it meant that all Type 1 trains have to be coupled with either a Type 2 or a Type 3 train to make it wheelchair accessible, because now that the lifts are gone, you must rely on the Type 2 or 3 trains in order to accept wheelchairs. Unfortunately, this is not going to apply for much longer, but TriMet used to say long ago that if you're in a wheelchair, you should wait near the middle of the Max Station platform or so. In case there is a high-floor train that is not wheelchair accessible, you'd be a pretty much equal distance away from a train car that is wheelchair accessible. Okay, more cons. These trains are definitely the noisiest trains that we have. Externally, they do weird things. Internally, you just hear more of the outside world. The seals just aren't as good on those trains as they are on the newer trains, and that fault mostly comes down to the doors. And through the Robertson Tunnel, these trains are loud. It doesn't come across very well on video, but we all know how loud they are. The Type 1 trains also make the roughest stops out of any of the trains. There is a quite pronounced lurch when you come to a stop. And that's, again, just due to their age and design. And another problem that they also have is the doors. There are so many mechanical issues that they have with the doors. The swinging design is cool, but things have to line up fairly precisely every single time the doors close, and if something is slightly out of whack or whatever, yeah, it will mess things up. There are also 3 things the Type 1 trains lack that the other trains have, and the first one of those is baseboard heating. The Type 1 trains, since the very beginning, have no baseboard heaters. Let's face it, the heating on the Type 1 trains kinda sucks. Just 2 vents, one at the very front and one in the very back, and that is your only source of heat. Not great. The Type 1 trains also aren't as energy efficient. Starting on the Type 2 trains onward, the trains have regenerative braking, which allows the energy to be recaptured and pushed back into the nearest substation or into the overhead wires. The Type 1 trains just waste away all the energy as heat blowing across a bank of resistors, which does slow down the train, but it means you can't recapture any of the energy and it's just heat. Another thing they lack are interior reader boards. Yeah, I mean, they have signs near the middle of the train, but those are just the destination signs that tell you Gresham, Airport, Clackamas, or whatever. That's all it says. It doesn't tell you what the next stop is, and nowhere in the Type 1s do they have that. I think they kind of missed the mark while they were updating some of the Type 1s with these new signs. They didn't add the capability of having them show the next stop, even though the newer Portland streetcars manufactured by United Streetcar do have that capability and show where it's going on the external reader boards and what the next stop is on the internal reader boards. And speaking of the HVAC from earlier, it's just all around not so great. The heating, the air conditioning, it's just not all that great. Some trains actually do have fairly good AC, which is pretty surprising, but other trains don't. They're all kind of different. Like I said, having 1 unit on either end of the train is just not super great. The trains are quite long, and just having 2 units on the roof is problematic. But you gotta remember that these sort of units were retrofitted in. They used to have no heating or air conditioning at all, and you had to open the windows if you wanted any sort of airflow. Their ride quality is sort of a pro and a con. These trains do seem very smooth as they're moving, as in not bumpy. You don't really feel that many of the bumps. This is very likely due to the fact that they are high-floor trains and so have more room for suspension equipment or whatever. I often think of it as though I'm gliding down the trackway. But they have one weird quality. When accelerating from a complete stop, they shudder a lot. They just shake and shudder for some reason. And it's only present on the Type 1 trains, and I'm not exactly sure why they do it, but it only does so for the first little bit, and then it stabilizes and is fine. Every Type 1 train does it, although some of them are more noticeable than others. And it makes me wonder if they did this brand new, too. And what happens if 2 Type 1s are hooked together, and do they still operate like that? What happens if it's just a single car Type 1 train? A lot of these questions we're never going to have the answers to, but it is something to think about. They have another weird quality too, and it's that they sway a lot. If you have issues with motion sickness or vertigo, you might want to avoid these. For the most part, it's unnoticeable to me, but I could understand how that could be a bother for some people. So now on to more pros. This has been going on way too long. For their age, these vehicles have held up extremely well. These have been incredibly durable, and I'm sure have exceeded most people's expectations of how long they'd be in service. This is in part thanks to TriMet's overhaul program that took place for the Type 1 trains from the 2000s up until 2018. But even TriMet's rust bucket, number 116, which is in pretty rough shape and has never been updated, runs quite well. It has lots of original pieces inside, and that leads me to another pro, and that is character. Every single Type 1 is a little different, and I'll put some text on screen for some things that I can think of from other Type 1s that make them unique. So when I made the script for this video, 102 had not been retired yet, so that's why that's still listed on here, and 108 has now been retired and will be sent off next, so these are ones that you won't really be able to check out anytime soon. But the rest of these, you should be able to hopefully still get on by the time I upload this video. And there are probably train cars that I've missed on here. Undoubtedly there are ones that I've probably missed. More pros, the nostalgia. Since 1986, these trains have really not changed all that much. The destination signs were replaced, the seats in most trains are purple, HVAC units were retrofitted in all the trains, wheel skirts were added to cover up the wheels, which used to be exposed. Electrical and mechanical components have been replaced over the decades. But in large part, their character and look and appearance really has not changed much at all. I think it's cool and is just like a step back in time. And another thing I've noticed about the Type 1 trains is how insanely quiet the motors are. These trains are almost scary quiet at low speeds. I mean, minus the buzzing on the outside. Here's a clip of one taking off, and see if you can hear the motor. Sure, the HVAC makes the bulk of the noise in these videos, but even in the rare times that the HVAC is off, it's still quite hard to hear the motors. So that's pretty interesting. Another pro is because of the simple high floor design, there are more seats in the Type 1s than any of the other train cars. So during times where the trains get busy, more people can sit. Duh. But during really crowded events where there's lots of people crammed into the trains, these seats can get into the way. So it can be a con depending on context. Another pro is that I just think they are more interesting. What other trains are this dramatic whenever there's an arc or a quick loss of power? I just think it's cool that they have these quirks, and I just enjoy riding them for their age and nostalgia and the fact that they are still active, even if they are very, very close to their deathbed. These trains have been a huge part of my life, and it's going to be hard to see them go, but I am very excited that they're getting not just retired, but replaced with these, the Type 6. And my shirt, as I'm sure many of us got the other Sunday when TriMet had that Type 6 event, well, these are going to be very nice, and so at least we're getting some nice, slick-looking trains that are going to replace the 1986 90-foot boxes on rails. While I'm talking about how Type 1s have been a pretty big part of my life, I'm going to tell you about some of my earliest memories that involve the Max, because I'm pretty sure they involve the Type 1 trains. I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. Back in around 2004, 2005 or so, I was a very small child, and I went to a Wiggles show. I hope you know the Wiggles, a kids show based in Australia, I believe. Well, they came to Portland and went to the Moda Center, which was then called the Rose Garden Arena, and we took the Max there. Because I remember getting off the train at Rose Quarter Transit Center and the doors opened, and I remember walking down the steps to exit the train. That means some of my earliest memories on the trains are of Type 1s. Also around 2010 or so, we went to the Saturday market, and I remember getting on a train and seeing the stainless steel poles and the purple seats inside, and so of course that must have been a Type 1 as well. I have other random memories that might be mixing together here and there of the Type 1s as well. So a final ride event is planned. I am quite sure TriMet said that in their August Riders Club thing. But at the time of me filming this and uploading this probably, we don't know exactly what is going to be a part of this event or when it will take place. The Type 6 trains have been doing some mainline tests. A lot of them are happening in the middle of the night, but some are happening in broad daylight. I have not been lucky enough to see them out doing mainline testing yet, but they are out there. Just check Rose City Transit to see if you can spot 601 or sometimes 605 on their testing. But once a Type 6 train enters service, they'll take a Type 1 train out of service, and it's pretty much going to be a one-for-one swap, because there's just not enough room to store all the trains as is. If we were to have all the Type 1s and all the Type 6s, it's going to be a one-for-one swap. And we've already retired and sent off car number 102, and car number 108 is next. Car number 106 has been retired and has been labeled as a part harvest for quite a few years now, and I believe that one is supposed to be going after 108. As far as what the next trains are that are retiring, we don't know. And for sure, we know that one train is going to be saved that is still in good operating condition, and whichever one is in the best shape, and it will be sent off to the Oregon Electric Railway Museum in Salem, or Brooks. And another one might be saved for one of the PSU projects that happened a few years ago of how could we reuse the Type 1 trains. But that's just a maybe. And the rest of these are pretty much just going to be sent off to get scrapped. It's pretty brute force, let's just get rid of these. So I tell you what, from now until they're gone, I'm going to try and get a bunch of videos of the Type 1s while they're still running, and I'll make a big video and a big deal about it. I've already collected some footage that I haven't uploaded on YouTube yet, and I'll just compile it into one long movie that's all the Type 1 trains. And that way we can remember them in hopefully good video quality, and we'll never forget. So if you're out and about and you see these old trains, get on them. Get on them while they're still running. It might be your last chance to check them out. They're on their way out, and it's quite sad, but these have served Portland very well over the years, and like I said earlier, they are getting replaced with some slick trains. Even if you hate these things and think that they should be burning in a pit below ground somewhere, I still suggest you get on one just one more time. For the nostalgia, and because you'll never ever get the chance to see them again. And before I completely close out, I wonder what this final ride event is going to look like. It's going to attract a lot of people, including myself, to ride them for one last time, but how is it going to be set up? Are the side signs going to say Final Ride on them? Are they going to have two Type 1 trains hooked together? It won't be wheelchair accessible if you do that, but people with disabilities can't use the Type 1 trains anyways, and usually avoid the Type 1s to get on a different train. So I don't think there would be huge outcry if the event were not wheelchair accessible. What route will it be on? Will it be a new route, Beaverton Transit Center to Gateway Transit Center? I don't know. I guess we're just gonna have to see. Anyways, this video got way too long. So I thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.